The story of Elena Ceausescu, the rise and fall of the mother of the nation. On the afternoon of December 25, 1989, Elena Ceausescu and her husband, Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, were taken from their trial in which they were sentenced to death. They were taken to a wall, where a firing squad was waiting to carry out their execution. This execution, which occurred amid the Romanian Revolution, was so rushed that the cameras only managed to capture the final shots when they were executed. Although the Ceausescus were hated by many within Romania, their power and influence in the country could not be ignored. Nicolae, the Romanian dictator, ruled with an iron fist, but Elena, his wife, played a crucial role, not only as his consort, but also as the mother of the nation, although her ambition and cruelty would ultimately be her downfall. If you are a history lover, subscribe now so you don't miss the most fascinating updates from around the world. Early years of Elena Ceausescu. Elena was born on January 7, 1916, into a humble family in the region of Wallachia, which is now part of Romania. Her parents were peasants, and her early life was marked by poverty. Although Elena did not receive advanced formal education, she was a clever young woman who eventually moved to Bucharest with her brother to seek better opportunities. In the Romanian capital, she worked as a laboratory assistant and later in a factory. Her involvement with politics began when she joined the Romanian Communist Party in 1939, in the midst of the Second World War. It was in this context that she met Nicolae Ceausescu, a party member who would later become her husband. In 1947, Elena and Nicolae were married, and with the rise of the Communist Party to power in Romania, Elena's career took off. She was appointed secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, while her husband quickly rose within the Communist Party. As Nicolae gained power, Elena became his right hand and also an influential figure in Romanian politics. When Nicolae became dictator of Romania, Elena assumed the role of First Lady, but also began to gain power in her own right, becoming the second most powerful person in the country, just after her husband. Rise to power and Elena's role. Over the years, Elena Ceausescu became a feared and respected figure in Romania. She was known as the mother of the nation, and the women of Romania saw her as a role model. Elena not only held high-level political roles, such as member of the Central Committee, but also gained great influence within the communist power structure. However, despite her public image, she was known for her excessive ambition, her obsession with wealth and power, and for her cruelty toward those who did not align with her interests. Her public image was of a cordial woman, but in private, she did not hesitate to order arrests, brutal interrogations, and more. Elena, obsessed with her image, was particularly concerned with her physical appearance. She often avoided being photographed in profile, as she did not want people to notice her facial features. Additionally, her desire for power led her to make increasingly drastic and ruthless decisions. Under her influence, the Ceausescu regime became increasingly authoritarian and oppressive, and living conditions in Romania deteriorated considerably. The Romanian Revolution of 1989. The growing repression and poor living conditions led to a wave of protests in Romania at the end of 1989. On December 16 of that year, demonstrations began in Timișoara due to the expulsion of a Hungarian priest. What began as a protest for a specific cause quickly turned into an uprising against the communist government. The Ceausescus tried to crush the rebellion with force, and security forces were deployed in the streets. As the protests spread, the Ceausescu regime opted for violence, using tear gas, water cannons, and beatings to disperse the demonstrators. On December 21, Nicolae Ceausescu gave a speech in Bucharest, trying to calm the situation. However, the demonstrators began shouting slogans like, "Down with Ceausescu," and "Revolution." As the crowd grew more hostile, the government responded with gunfire, and the streets of Bucharest turned into a battlefield. Violence peaked and, amid the chaos, the Ceausescus decided to flee the country. The escape attempt and capture. On December 22, 1989, the Ceausescus attempted to escape from Bucharest by helicopter, but upon reaching the roof of the building where they were located, they found demonstrators who had also accessed the site. In a moment of panic, the Ceausescus were pushed into the helicopter, along with their bodyguards, but the helicopter pilot, who had previously shown loyalty to the regime, also began to doubt the mission. Despite the tension and the fear visible on the Ceausescu's faces, the pilot left them in Snagov, where they were arrested by police forces and taken to a military barracks. Elena and Nicolae Ceausescu were detained and quickly brought to trial. Although the legitimacy of their trial was questioned, the charges were clear: genocide, torture, corruption, and crimes against the Romanian people. The trial was brief, and although both defended themselves, it was evident that the fate of the Ceausescus was already sealed. They were sentenced to death, and the execution was carried out immediately. The execution of the Ceausescus. On December 25, 1989, on Christmas afternoon, Elena and Nicolae Ceausescu were taken from their cell, led to a wall, and executed by a firing squad. Elena, realizing her fate, began shouting and insulting the soldiers surrounding her. Despite her resistance, the execution was quick and efficient. In this way, the Ceausescus, who had ruled Romania with an iron fist, were eliminated in the midst of a revolution that ended decades of oppression. Elena Ceausescu was, at 73 years old, the only woman executed under the modern state of Romania. Her death marked the end of her unrestrained ambition, which led her to become one of the most hated figures in Romanian history. Despite her power and wealth, her fall was as swift as her rise, and her execution was the result of the brutal revolution that overthrew the Ceausescu family. The story of Elena Ceausescu is a reminder of the dangers of absolute power and corruption. Throughout her life, she fought to gain more power, wealth, and prestige, but ultimately, her ambition led her to death in a public execution. The Romanian Revolution of 1989, which overthrew the Ceausescus, remains one of the most important revolutions in recent history, and the figure of Elena Ceausescu has become a symbol of tyranny and the fall of an oppressive regime. If you are a history lover, subscribe now so you don't miss the most fascinating updates from around the world.